and pay better attention to what you're saying if I'm not looking at you. So when my gaze wanders and I'm staring at the floor or the walls, or anything but you, yes. I'm listening intently.
Yes, I relate to that so much. It's like someone comes up to you and says, I really need to talk to you, Tom. And you're like, okay, let me sit down. What's up? Because most people are like, oh, okay. And they're sort of staring intently and they're like that. And it's, man, I can't do that. If you want me to process what you're saying and deeply and put myself in your shoes and all that, it needs to be, I need to shut off all of the faculties of my brain to do that just one thing. And that includes eye contact and indirect communication. To outsiders, autism content and autistic people, and autism in general even, can seem like a very unknown, scary topic to approach. Especially if you are meeting an autistic person in real life, you might be wondering, what exactly should you say? Should you ignore it? Should you talk to them about it? Well, today we're going to have a look at a variety of different Reddit posts from a channel called Reddit and Chill. Very nice name there. Asking autistic people of Reddit, what would you like everyone to know? Very, very to the point. Let's get into it.
r/ask Reddit by Reddit and Chill. Autistic people of Reddit, what would you like everyone to know? If I'm asking questions that seem dumb even though I seem smart most of the time, just answer them. Sometimes all I need is the context I'm asking for to help me sort things out. So annoying when people think that something is obvious and act all frustrated in these situations.
Yeah, I think like that's something that we can all empathize with to a certain degree. Like the lack of clarity in a lot of people's communication is very, very apparent. Like quite often I do have to ask quite a lot of questions, and I either get labeled as like the person who always has like something to say, or I just stop doing it. I stop asking questions and just do things wrong, and then they ask me, oh, why have you done that wrong?
Autistic adults exist. It's not like as soon as we turn 18 we wave our autism goodbye. Autistic women exist too. We're just harder to spot than the men.
Yes.
That autism isn't a one-size-fits-all diagnosis. It's a very broad, non-linear spectrum. More like a color wheel than a straight line. Also, just because you might not think someone looks autistic or you never would have guessed, doesn't mean they aren't. Chances are, those people expend a lot of energy masking their autistic traits to fit in.
100%. I like the fact that they included the non-linear spectrum element of it. So a lot of people kind of view, a lot of people sort of from the mainstream who don't really have a lot of information about autism, they tend to think it's like a scale. I mean, it kind of leads people into seeing it as that way, doesn't it? Because like you see like ASD 1, 2, and 3 when you like Google search around autism. It kind of solidifies into people's brains that it's like this sliding scale of being autistic or not. It's definitely not like that. I mean, the ASD 1, 2, and 3 scale is pretty much just about like support needs and presentations, particularly. I mean, autistic people vary like so much like within those groups. It's good to both see it in that medical sort of context, but also to see it as that kind of trait spectrum. I always call it a radar diagram, and people correct me on it, but I'm just going to keep saying it because it's solidified in my brain.
Good. This is what I want people to know. I spend so much time and energy to look normal and I hate it. I wish people like my classmates knew this. That talking and working with them is so hard for that reason. If I mention that I can't tell if you're joking or serious, even if it's blindingly obvious that you were joking, I need you to bear with me when I ask. Because sometimes it is so difficult to differentiate between a joke and a serious sentiment.
Yeah, and it's not always like, it depends on the person, because some people are very dry in their humor, you know, like it's not always the easiest to tell. Like if you know someone quite well, you can guess by their indirect communication what they mean. But if it's someone like a stranger or someone like that, it's so hard to to know sometimes. I've had so many situations where like a stranger's made a joke and I've just kind of looked at them blankly, like, and I ask, is that a joke? And they always take it as an insult. It's like, oh, you don't think I'm funny? So you trying to take a dig at me? It's like, no, it's, I don't know if you're joking or not. I was obsessed about having a perfect walking and standing posture. Yeah, I think that was the thing that I looked at when I was like masking quite heavily too. Can definitely understand why the ASD 1, 2 and 3 can confuse most neurotypicals, yeah.
I literally almost sat on my boss lap at work because he made a gesture that I interpreted as come sit. Obviously I'm terrible with body language. So I stepped toward him, then asked him, "You don't want me to sit on your lap, do you?" One of the more embarrassing interactions with my boss. "You don't look autistic" is the worst thing you can say.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I know that you would never guess that I'm autistic without me explicitly telling you that. That still doesn't mean that I'm not. My question is always, how does one look autistic? It's not like we don't function.
And I think a lot of people have noticed this very strange, like, I don't know if the right word is dichotomy, maybe, whereby like sometimes like the same person can both say that you're not strange, you're not different or weird enough to be autistic, and then at the same time call you sort of weird and sort of question your behavior around certain things. It's very strange why, like, how people do that. Like, you know, I don't really know how else to describe it other than, you know, sort of conflicting ideas. But I think it's maybe because people don't see like your differences and your expression and your behaviors as being autistic. They just see it as you, or like something that's like personality derived. On Twitch, some people use autistic instead of the R word. Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Mighty Mouse, love the name, by the way. The robot voice is killing me. I only think of memes. According to my trolls, I'm not autistic, but sometimes I am. They can't seem to decide. I've had a few. I think there's one person who came into the stream once and said like, "You're not autistic." I think it was over on Instagram when I did the Auti Time live, saying, "You look completely normal. You're not autistic at all." And then like, I mean, how exactly am I going to express more autism? I don't know. It's crazy.
If I seem standoffish to you, it's literally because I have zero social skills and will not approach you to talk if you don't talk to me first. Exactly. I'm still an introvert, but I will be very nice and sociable if I'm not the one initiating conversation. Being autistic does not mean a lack of empathy. We may not express or process our feelings the same way as neurotypical people do. But it does not mean we don't have feelings. In fact, many on the spectrum have very intense feelings that can be overwhelming at times. And we don't know how to process them, which can lead to meltdowns.
100%. That is a call to the old alexithymia, which I do love to talk about so much. You know, struggling to identify and notice your feelings. I think one of the reasons why like autistic people have been characterized as like struggling with emotional regulation, I don't necessarily think it's not having like the regulatory tools to actually calm ourselves down, because we have stimming, we have all sorts of different strategies that we can use to sort of keep us feeling okay in a good place. It's just the alexithymia. Like it's almost like there's a threshold, you know. You only really notice it when it becomes an issue. You know, whereas most people, they can kind of be semi-consciously or unconsciously aware of what their like state of emotions are, even at those very, very low levels. But in terms of the lack of empathy, obviously like a really big myth. It's very, very clear through the literature that autistic people display a normal amount, or if not higher levels of empathy than most people. It's just that interpreting other people's indirect communication when it comes to emotions. That's something that we can struggle with quite often. The jokes I get is slapstick. I love that type of comedy. Yeah. Have you seen the Naked Gun? That's like one of my favorite films. I don't often find comedies that funny, but The Naked Gun just gets me so much. It's crazy. Do people look autistic? I don't think so. People used to think I don't want to talk because I don't approach, and I used to be upset at myself for not being more assertive socially, but realizing I'm autistic makes me kinder to myself. I did go through a long period of time, like particularly at university, where I became very, very, very sociable. And I did get to a point where I did start approaching people quite a bit. And I do go through phases in my adult life where I'll go up and talk to people at the gym. But most of the time, I'm just focused on what I'm doing, you know. I don't necessarily want to have interaction with people.
One reason I sometimes seem cold or not affectionate toward others is because if I were to really allow myself to feel and express the empathy that I have towards them, it would be too much and I'd be overwhelmed by depression or anxiety for days. That eye contact is a weird, horrible thing and I don't know how you people do it. Oh shit, that one hit hard. Sometimes it just works. But once I'm aware of it, it's complete and utter hell lol. Oh.
I have kind of a weird thing, because I don't necessarily find eye contact difficult. Like it's pretty natural for me to make like a probably less than average amount of eye contact, but I do make it. I'm very aware of how eye contact in the past like impacted me emotionally, so I'm always very, very like careful with making too much eye contact. You know, I don't want to make too much, so I don't necessarily think about it too much, because if I try to make like the optimum amount of eye contact, like sometimes I'll just make too much and I'll get like a feeling like I'm somewhat trying to like intimidate someone or something, which I'm not. It's just so much, it's just like an extra aspect of socializing as well. Like you have to speak to someone, you have to process, you have to listen to them, and you have to monitor your own eye contact. Nah, I don't think so. Socially, I'm a vampire, I need to be invited in. I love that.
Infodumping. Opted to mention it because the sheer amount of horrid things that I have seen being aimed at autistic people for infodumping is nasty. We often get special interests in things and enjoy gathering information and talking to others about them. We find someone to talk to about it and everything comes out. Talk your ear off for hours easily, and the details will often be very intricate. We don't mean anything other than being excited about the thing. We don't always catch on that you're not interested in the intricacies of George Carter's relationship with the Chiss ascendancy. Sorry. It's not just trying to show off, to look superior, being elitist, or gatekeeping. We're just excited over something we enjoy.
Yeah, and do you guys think when it comes to infodumping, because in my experience, I find that, like, I mean, infodump, maybe the way that people characterize or categorize infodumping is by like somebody who's trying to take the conversation to more of like a deep sort of interesting level rather than making small talk. You know what I mean? Like perhaps in a sort of conversation over dinner where everyone's had like a few drinks or something and you're having like a deep sort of one-to-one conversation. I don't think that would necessarily be characterized as infodumping, but in the context of like having sort of a small talk like conversation, maybe that's why people characterize it in that way. I don't know. It's just a thought. What do you guys think? I think a lot of us would come up to talk to you. Oh, that's nice. I don't know. I think I'm always like hyper aware somewhat of like my size. So I always try to somewhat offset like the intimidation factor about myself by not making as much eye contact and being a little bit silly, you know. They call it infodumping because they can't concentrate for more than 2 minutes. Yeah, I mean it's kind of nice, isn't it? It's like, who wouldn't want to like come away from a conversation knowing more about something? Isn't that like one of the great things about it? Do you talk with people much at the gym? I talk to there's a few like regular people that I see about, and we have sort of semi small talky kind of conversations. It's not really small talky. Well, I guess it is, but We have interesting conversations. There's a few people like that I do talk to, but I don't tend to like go up to people at the gym. Number one, because I'm focusing on my workout and I'm trying to get it done in like a reasonable amount of time. Number two, like I don't know what they're like. I have no idea other than what they look like as to whether I'll enjoy talking to them, you know? And some people can be a bit weird, like when it comes to sort of strangers coming up to talk to them. Not weird, but you know what I mean? I'm not like, oh my God. Like they're just kind of a little bit annoyed. That's the better word, not weird. So that they're annoyed that you've come over to talk to them. Some people are like that. That's funny. I prefer listening to info dumps and info dumping. I don't necessarily think like it needs to be characterized as an info dumping, really. Like, it's just like a different style of communication, you know? Exchanging large amounts of segment of text or like a conversation with somebody and then allowing them to respond. It's kind of like a debate, isn't it, to a certain degree? I find it a bit more interesting than usual. Are you tall? Yes, I'm 6'3", and I weigh 100 kilos. I'm quite a big person. I tend to wear a lot of gothy kind of black clothing as well, which is probably not the best thing to do if I'm wanting to be approachable, but...
My 13-year-old grandson with ASD has this same passion. He's a gamer with astonishing recall on the intricacies of his favorites, including release dates, updates, designers, character details, the list goes on and on. I committed at his birth to be the best grandma he could ever want. So I'll listen excitedly as he chatters on. And, though I'm not a great player, have learned so much about game culture and development from him. I wish so much that everyone he meets would take the time to listen to his excitement. I understand.
That's so great that they're listening to their autistic grandson. Like it's so nice to hear stuff like that, because people do sometimes make that characterization as it being annoying. You're 15 inches taller than me.
Understand your emotions. In fact, I understand them so well that my own emotions are influenced by other people's. And other people's emotions can easily overwhelm me. Emotional states of myself and others are easy to read, especially in voice tone and expression. But I don't get your body language at all. Yes, this isn't universal. I just get annoyed at the whole "you're all asocial. You don't understand emotions" when in fact it differs for everyone.
Yeah, like the people's expressions as well can differ from person to person. I'm very, very good at, like, I've developed my cognitive empathy quite a lot over the years, to the point where it's probably better than most neurotypical individuals that I come across. If you do struggle, like, with somewhat being like an emotional sponge, like you struggle in situations where people are being particularly angry, or they're sad, or they're annoyed, or they're upset around you, and you sort of feel and absorb that energy, I'd really highly recommend looking into this concept of autistic mirroring, because quite often what we can do as a somewhat of a way of masking is it's something that like psychologists do as well, like psychotherapists. We inadvertently mirror their facial expression, their body language, the way that they're talking, to the point that it actually has an actual impact on our own emotional state. Like it's quite significant. Like it's a two-way street. Like your emotions, well, for some people, it expresses on the outside, but also if you express things on the outside, it affects how you feel as well. It's like when people say if you smile more, you'll feel a bit happier. There is some level of truth to that, and that is this kind of strange sort of dual feedback mechanism. I highly recommend if you do find yourself in a situation like that where someone is in like an emotional state which is quite negative, try to stay a little bit more centered in how you are feeling and what you were feeling before that. It does help, and over time I've tried doing that, and it's very much helped me in a lot of circumstances like that. Especially if people are being like angry, you know, you can just sort of keep a bit more of a center. I think there is a limit to it. Like there is a point, of course, but smiling doesn't work for you. But the thing is with, you know, because a lot of us do have alexithymia, it might not always be apparent as well. Like, it could actually have like a positive impact on you, as it would do with most people. It's just like sort of identifying, noticing those small changes in emotions can somewhat be quite hard for us. I mean, I understand, like, when people say that, it's kind of this whole toxic positivity thing, and it's just a bit annoying, but I think if you stack a lot of these, like, suggestions that people give you about staying a bit more regulated, and you combine them together, and you see it, you do all of these things, you will be able to notice like a change to a certain degree. Oh my god, I didn't not know about mirroring. Sounds familiar. It's a good skill. Like, it's actually a really good skill. But it does also impact you. You know, you've got to use it sparingly. 100%.
I can read other people's emotions easily, but not everyone can. I forget to put emotions on my face sometimes.
Yeah.
Some people I know get overwhelmed more by their own. Some can't read expression or tone like I can. Some can read body language where I go blank. We're not one size fits all. I actually came here to say that not everyone with autism has alexithymia, which you describe perfectly. Feel free to tell me to back off if you don't want to talk about it, but I'm really curious about something. When I got tested for ASD as part of my ADHD intake, a large part of the testing procedure was based on mind blindness. That is, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I've kind of been wondering if people who have autism but not alexithymia are actually much better at this than people with both. If so, would it be much harder to diagnose because being able to recognize emotions perhaps also automatically causes lower mind blindness and therefore higher reciprocity? Or does recognizing emotions not really help with reacting appropriately? Can I ask how this works for you?
That's a very interesting point that they make. I think it's so difficult, isn't it, when we talk about like the aspects of autism and what we look for, because there is such a massive amount of variation in the expressions that people have, and also these little subcategories of things that we can have, like alexithymia. How much of an impact is that? And also, one thing about alexithymia is it actually something that we are born with, that we carry through our life just because of our genetics? Or is it something that we develop through time? Because alexithymia is pretty common to people who have like PTSD and things of that nature. I'm an adult who does actually struggle with fear of mind. I still do. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of debate like within the autistic community about it. I mean, the usual suspects obviously like characterize anything that comes from Simon Baron-Cohen as being inherently sort of wrong and ableist, and I don't know. I mean, a lot of the tests around sort of mind blindness, I mean, it's basically this aspect of, I mean, putting yourself in another person's shoes. It's a bit difficult to say that is just something of because we're autistic, because would that be the same for us with other autistic people? Or is that just a product of us just having a different brain and way of working and perceiving and all that stuff to like other people? If it's not an autism thing, I just do struggle with it. I'm not saying that you're wrong necessarily. I think people have like definitely like debated this quite a bit within the autistic community. Like, it seems if you mention anything about fear of minds, like in the online spaces, people tend to be very combative about that stuff. Did you all know Simon's related to Sasha? Yeah. I think I talked to him about it on the podcast. It was cool. Valentine says, my empathy is so bad. I do experience sympathy though. I just don't feel what other people feel when it comes to negative emotions, but positive emotions can influence me. I wouldn't say that your empathy is bad, Valentine. There is like different aspects to it. One of which being cognitive and the other one being adaptive empathy. And adaptive empathy is what we see as, you know, sympathy, like what you're saying, which is actually what most people see empathy as. The cognitive element, which is something that, again, Simon Baron-Cohen had looked into, trying to dispel this empathy myth, is the actual interpretation of indirect communication. So, like, reading people's emotional states without them telling us. That can be something that a lot of us struggle with, but when it comes to like empathy as we know it, sort of in the mainstream, you know, kind of a bit more of a lay perspective. We definitely do not struggle with that. That is for sure. That's something that's related to psychopathy or sociopathy sometimes. Sometimes I'm watching a show, I get more information than the character, so I would make different decisions, so I get upset in how someone is acting. But it's because I know more info than them. Yeah, I mean, that's quite a good analogy around like the concept of mind blindness, I suppose. And the same as Valentine.
And do you think you were more difficult to diagnose because you do recognize emotions? I was diagnosed with Asperger's at the age of 11. I feel like I'm part of a play where everyone has the script except me. I'm sorry, but I can't help but think, wow, that's deep. I totally get what you mean.
I think the best way that I've described like neurotypical like social rules in communication is kind of like, you know, everyone in the world, or the neurotypicals of the world, have sort of got together in this secret club, and they've all given each other like pointers on different things that they're going to do to each other. And, you know, obviously like it's something that they develop and they understand with time and learn to implement as just a part of their own development. Like for us, it can be quite different. We have to be very cognitive in like understanding these different things, but...
Because I'm quiet doesn't mean I'm snooty or aloof and desire to be excluded. Reading through these comments, I'm getting worried that I might have autism. How did you who have autism find out? Speak with a doctor and try and find a professional who can identify.
I think that's the way that most people these days who are like diagnosed find out. Maybe not particularly through Reddit, but, you know, through online content. I think that's one of the great things, which is also something that is criticized quite heavily a lot about the autistic community, is our ability to be relatable to people, because there is quite a heavy stigma around it. And I do find that being able to like relate to people in such a way and sort of share our experiences, I think that's one of the really great things about it. But there will be a lot of people outside of the community sort of saying, you know, everything's autism now, and what you're talking about, and these are things that most people experience, and this is just an introvert thing, or like stuff along those lines.
It. And honestly, if you've lived your whole life not knowing you're autistic, it's not like finding out now is gonna fix your problems, but it might explain them.
I disagree with that. I think there are some things, like it can definitely be like like one of the best sort of, like just being aware of that stuff and learning about that stuff is definitely like pretty surefire ignition to like self-development. And, you know, even things that you didn't necessarily see as autism things, you might be able to identify them. You could just, you know, for your entire life, you're sort of trying to compensate for differences that you have sort of compared to other people. And when you realize, you can be like, oh, actually, this is, you know, this is an autism thing, and I can actually do some things about the difficult situations that I get into, you know.
And pay better attention to what you're saying if I'm not looking at you. So when my gaze wanders and I'm staring at the floor or the walls, or anything but you, yes, I'm listening intently.
Yes. I relate to that so much. It's like someone comes up to you and say, I really need to talk to you, Tom. And you're like, okay, let me sit down. What's up? Whereas most people are like, oh, okay. And they're sort of staring intently and they're like that. And it's, man, I can't do that. If you want me to process what you're saying and deeply and put myself in your shoes and all that, it needs to be, I need to shut off all other faculties of my brain to do that just one thing. And that includes eye contact and indirect communication.
I just can't focus on looking at you or making eye contact and understand what you are saying at the same time. If I look at you, I won't hear you. If you call me on the phone, I will also not hear you. Phones stress me out. I can pay better attention to what you're saying if I'm not looking at you. Same, honestly. There are times when I wonder if going blind would make the world less of a sensory nightmare, or at least make it easier for me to talk smoothly. When I seem slow to you, it's because I need you to be more specific in what you need from me. My brain is literally unable to play the guessing game. Edit 1. Oh my god. Thanks for all the upvotes. Didn't expect this. Thanks everyone.
A better way of explaining this would probably be the processing delays. There's one thing that hasn't changed, like, since I was very small, is that my processing delay it's pretty consistent. It doesn't really matter, like, what my emotional state is. I will always be at least 1 or 2 seconds behind people when it comes to processing. And it's one of the things that sort of makes people interpret me as being a bit awkward or perhaps a little bit shy or introverted, is that it does take me a while for me to process what someone's saying to me. And by the time that I've done that, I'm kind of a little bit behind when it comes to talking. So I do tend to interrupt people because I am just like very much behind, and people tend to communicate and do things, and very quickly, like compared to how I am. I definitely do take things very, very slowly.
Edit 2. Thanks for the gold. First one finally. More accurately, it can play the guessing game. It just plays it way too seriously. We are not all like Sheldon Cooper, Sean Murphy, Forrest Gump, or other extremely autistic people in movies series. Ugh, Sheldon.
Is Forrest Gump an autistic character? Is Forrest Gump an autistic character? I didn't really get that. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't really get that impression. I guess what exactly is he supposed to be a representation of, now that I think about it? I mean, I always assumed that perhaps he had, like, a significant sort of intellectual disability. What do you guys think? Do any of you know? Like, was it based on, like, being an autistic character? Never thought Forrest Gump was autistic. No, me neither. After some reading. Do a Google search. Someone do a Google search. Is Forrest Gump supposed to be autistic? So I don't think he is.
Is like the black face of autism. We tend to notice the weirdest stuff or things in the background. A skill that has served me well in my line of work. Please don't be one of those people who assumes autism means we have a high or low mental age. I'll be insulted if you talk to me like I'm 8. I'll be confused if you talk to me like Albert Einstein.
I feel like a lot of the, perhaps ASD1 characterized kids, they tend to have, and I would say even for my own experiences, that the mental age in terms of, like, vocabulary, in terms of, like, skills and knowledge in certain areas tends to be a lot higher. But when it comes to the emotional, social stuff, it does appear to be a lot lower in autistic kids, like, compared to people of their age. So you get a very sort of interesting combination of being, like, in terms of cognitive ability, being exceptional, but at the same time, sort of struggling with, like, the emotional, social world. He made better choices than Jenny, though. Jenny! Yeah, he definitely did, didn't he?
Textures and sounds are painful. Sometimes even being touched can hurt. This world is very isolating for many of us. Some are too autistic for the NT world and some aren't autistic enough for the special needs world. No. Not everyone is a little autistic.
Yes.
You don't understand why, how, what. Some of us may have flat tones and cannot express emotion, but we do feel.
I mean, that's the whole vocal monotony and flat affect concepts.
And the autism jokes sometimes make us sad and or angry. Meltdowns and tantrums. In a meltdown you lose all awareness and it can be very dangerous.
100%. That's one thing that I wish parents and all sort of people in the mainstream understood. Because I've talked to a lot of parents of autistic kids, and one of the things that they talk about very, very frequently is the judgments from, like, other parents and people around them when their kid's having a meltdown. Like, they really don't understand it. They think that they're like acting out, and that there is a really big difference between the two. In a meltdown, you do lose a lot of your awareness and your functionality, and you tend to have very, very extreme sort of emotions depending on the person, like what those emotional states look like. And tantrums are usually like an emotional display to get something that you want. And there's a very big difference between the two. Google seems to think Forrest Gump has an intellectual/developmental disorder. Well, I mean, neurodevelopmental autism is neurodevelopmental disorder in terms of medical literature, at least.
Thanks for saying all these things. I don't have autism, but my kid does. He's a toddler and still learning to express himself, and I'm still learning how to be the parent he needs. Reading accounts from people with autism is very helpful. People used to tell me to discipline him during meltdowns, but I could tell he was in a lot of pain. I just stay close to him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do not discipline a meltdown. My God. Just want to put this out there. Like, if you are an autism parent and you've come to watch my stuff, or you're watching any sort of content from other autistic adults and you're learning about it, like, I have so much respect for people like you, because, man, like, we just really don't get enough people like you who really do want to, like, understand their kids. There are some people who very much, like, try to ignore it, or just, you know, it's they have this mentality where they just don't want to, I don't know, accept to some degree that their child's different. And so rather than seeking to learn more and seeking to understand, you know, they very much, like, try to fit them into a certain mold, or even in some cases halt their progress in some areas and say that, like, oh, you can't do this because you're autistic, kind of thing. I made a post recently which got a lot of mixed reviews, I would say, on Instagram, which is the autism is not an excuse thing. You know, a lot of people interpreted that as me saying you can't use autism as an excuse, because that's, you know, that is something that we hear quite a bit from other people, which definitely gets on our nerves. So I understand that. But I was more talking about, you know, this kind of tendency that we either enforce ourselves, or people around us, particularly parents, would enforce on us, which is that we can't do things, which is wrong, because we can do things even if we find it difficult because we're autistic. It's just finding different routes, it's making adjustments, it's a whole host of different things that you have to do in order to get to the same result. And it's also remembering that although we might struggle in some areas, that we do actually have some really key positives, some real skill, some real area of life that we do definitely excel in.
Offer comfort, words and touch. If he allows it, and it seems to be a far more constructive way to deal with it. That Autism Speaks as a hate group. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network is a better organization to support. What did Autism Speaks do? I don't doubt that they're a hate group. But just out of curiosity, I am going to say something that offends you. It's going to happen. And when I do, tell me, or I won't have any idea what I did wrong or why you're upset. I might be different, but that doesn't mean I want to be treated any differently to anyone else. I've had people pull 180s on me and start talking to me in baby talk after me telling them that I'm autistic. I fucking hate it.
The infantilization, man. God damn it. We hate that stuff. Baby talk. Oh my God. I've had a few people do that to me in the past. Very strange. Very, very strange. I definitely feel like the general statement of I might be different, but I don't want to be treated different. Like, I don't want to be treated differently in, like, a negative way, but if people can be a bit more direct with me, then that would be great. You know what I mean?
That not everyone with autism is like Rain Man. We can't all recite from memory what day of the week certain events happened or our sevens. However, we all have different strengths, and some of us have intense interests that we know a lot about. We are not a party trick for this either.
Yeah.
Ever heard of autism hiding in plain sight? Next time they want to make one of your stupid autism jokes in class, keep that in mind. Someone is sitting in there. Already feel bad about having the diagnosis and being scared what people might think. It doesn't help us.
No, 100%. I mean, the likelihood that you will have, like, one autistic person in your year is pretty high, you know, or even more than that.
It just makes us shut up even more. We are everywhere. You just doesn't see. Sometimes my brain hard locks trying to process sentences out loud, sort of like when you can't remember a word, but for the entire sentence forming apparatus. The analogy I use is when a program goes not responding on your computer, it's not thinking or waiting. It's just stopped and spam clicking on it does nothing.
Have you ever spam clicked your dialogue option? 31 people watching yet. Yeah, I was only 13 in likes. Spank that button in order to spread love for Thomas. Yeah, guys. Yes, please. Spank that like button. I think this is something that is related to like the processing delays again. And also the pressure of social communication can be a lot sometimes. Why do people do that? WTF? Did they already know you? Did they, or did they just meet you and heard that you had autism? Baby talk so insulting. Yeah, it sucks. I mean, I don't even use baby talk for kids, even, usually. I mean, sometimes I'm a bit more sort of emotionally expressive, but I don't do it. Like, and especially not to adults. It doesn't matter what support needs they have, what kind of intellectual differences they have. I think talking to anybody like that is sometimes not great. Although, like, particularly with my grandma, no, she's very sort of far into dementia, into Alzheimer's. She does respond quite positively to what we would consider baby talk, but that's kind of an isolated circumstance, you know. You know, she's very late on in it. You know, it's only recently that I've started doing it.
Either have to wait for it to kick back into processing, or restart from scratch. Had a job interview where they asked me a question that I didn't have an answer prepared for. And I spent a very awkward, what felt like 5 minutes, 30 or so seconds of silence where I knew I was supposed to be talking. But my brain was stalled. It's not that I couldn't work out what to say. It's that I couldn't work out how to speak. Every autistic person is different. Some hate physical contact. Some love it.
Yes.
Some can't speak. Some can. Do not assume we are all the same ever.
Oh my god. The caps locks. Sorry to hear that, Thomas. I'm so sorry about your grandmother. Yeah. It's not the best, you know, but I still really enjoy going to see her and interacting with her. You know, like a lot of people think that, you know, when someone sort of gets into late dementia or Alzheimer's, that they're not really like the same person, and they sort of view them that way, that they're kind of like a different person. I try not to view it like that, you know. I think you know, I always enjoy, you know, talking to her and conversing with her, even though communication can be quite hard for her. But, you know, there's some moments of lucidity, some points at which she can formulate sentences and such, which I definitely cherish quite a bit. But I enjoy going to see her and talking to her. It's just different, you know, and you've got to kind of adapt. But she's still the same person, and I still care about her like a lot.
I hope this blows up because people on the spectrum need more of a voice on society. I want to know more because people aren't educated about this stuff. Great question. I thought so too. Because I feel like people see autism as not being able to do a lot of things, but that's not true. Having autism doesn't mean we're immediately incapable of doing anything.
I think the key word is they're like immediately, sort of inherently incapable. It very much varies from person to person. You got to take each individual for each individual.
People who have bullied me in the past bullied me because I'm different, and they made me hate who I truly was.
Yeah.
As I got older, I learned to love myself and learned to embrace my flaws. I had to get diagnosed in my mid-20s so that people would finally accept that I have difficulties. I didn't want to get diagnosed, but I felt forced to. Just so I could prove once and for all that it's not me choosing to be a difficult person. In the UK the process takes so much time, and in the end you can't really be treated anyway, so what's the point when I already know and have accepted it? It's like if you weren't diagnosed as a kid then you're not valid. But only the kids with the most extreme symptoms get diagnosed early, and I guess that's what people think autism looks like.
I don't think it's just the kids that have more signs. I think it's a lot to do with like the environment. Like, are the parents picking up on it? Are some of the teachers picking up on it? Is the doctor, is the occupational therapist picking up on it? Like, it's really dependent on who's around there. And also there is a really big feed in when it comes to stigma, which stops people from going for it.
It really doesn't take much to adjust the way you interpret what I'm saying, or just to understand I might not be as clear as I want to be. But people will still overreact and misinterpret. Despite knowing I have difficulty communicating. Even if I didn't have autism, it wouldn't be unreasonable to understand that. But people in general still don't get it. Even ones who rave about mental health awareness. It's like autism isn't taken as seriously as depression or anxiety because it's not urgent. It's viewed as a permanent thing that can't be cured, so it's treated like a lost limb. Anxiety and depression are easier to understand, I guess, and are somewhat curable with treatment in time. Whereas,
well, it's relatable, isn't it? Like, to some degree, like some people can, like a lot of people can relate with feelings of panic, you know, perhaps not in terms of generalized anxiety, like understanding what daily life is like, you know, day to day sort of the experiences and sort of living with that condition. And maybe depression either, like you have a lot of instances of like situational depression when it comes to living life, you know, some bad things happen, some people develop situational depression. Autism, maybe not so much relatable for most people, like on the surface, I suppose. I do find that people who aren't autistic can relate to me when I explain it to them in terms that they understand. But that's not really something that we're necessarily taught a lot about through life, just through the mainstream. Aidan asks, are you high functioning? Like, can you do things on your own completely independently? A lot of people don't like the term high functioning. I think it could definitely be solved by saying relatively high functioning, because I do function a lot more objectively than perhaps someone with ASD-free, you know, someone who has like an intellectual disability. But I do have some support needs. I do struggle with transport quite a bit. I struggle with executive functioning, so it's like planning and sort of organizing myself and my life, but particularly things which are very small and maintenance related, those things tend to be things that I struggle with. There are ways that I've got around that, and the way for me to function independently is to make sure that everything that I need to do is part of a daily or weekly routine, you know, so I can do it. The only time at which I would be considered to have quite high support needs is during very severe depressive periods. Those are times where I do need a lot of support. And the way that my depressive symptoms tend to manifest sort of atypically because of the things that I find difficult myself that I can maintain usually, that those things tend to drop, and they're not necessarily the same as what neurotypicals would experience. So those executive functioning skills tend to drop quite a bit. Can you do some things on your own independently? I think that there is importance of like the context of the question, because I can do everything independently if I wanted to. But managing it, maintaining it, doing it over a long period of time, it really depends. It's not necessarily a question about skill. It's more about maintenance over a long period of time. You know, they said I was high functioning, but I struggle with a lot, especially socially and financially. Yeah, and I can understand like the reaction, because a lot of people use it in the context of like saying, "Oh, okay, you don't struggle that bad. You're high functioning." You know, when people use it in a context like that, it's quite offensive to a lot of us, because it's kind of like undermining the difficulties that we may have. But again, like with a lot of these things related to like stigma and stereotypes, like the whole thing about us being like everyone being a little bit autistic, you know, it's used to make people feel a bit more at one with the group or relatable, or trying to empathize with them a little bit, make them feel less alone. Same thing with like saying high functioning. It's kind of like, you know, they think that it's better. It's better to be more neurotypical or function in the way that most people do, you know. So they're kind of making this value judgment, which can hit quite hard sometimes.
As autism is a bottom line disability, so there's no point trying. I don't really get that, but that seems to be the attitude of a lot of people who I thought would be more understanding of mental health. Might just be me being around bad people, but my entire experience at school and university in the UK has made me feel like this is just how society is. If I'm looking at your shoes or behind you when I'm talking to you, it means I'm paying attention to what you're saying. I'm not ignoring you. Having to act normal is so ducking straining. I'm monotone and don't like being touched. But family and social pressure, including having teachers screaming in my ducking ear to act normal. Not normal, but a non-disabled normal. I'm always multitasking, acting, dealing with sensory issues, sight, sound, and touch, and doing whatever I am. It's like being in the closed for a gay person in a bigoted area, which I was. The stress broke me in different ways. I was also supposed to be the good autistic who could prove we were just as smart and worthy as normal kids. We're not all introverted.
Yeah.
I love going out and talking to different people.
Same.
Trying new things. Physical activity can be difficult as we have coordination issues. I have trouble at jobs because I don't talk about my...
Physical activity can also be great for us because we're very, very good at sticking to routine and focusing. I would counteract that. Because I do have vestibular difficulties in terms of vestibular insensitivity, so that's like to do with my balance. And also proprioceptive insensitivity, so my awareness of my body in space. Never stopped me being good at Taekwondo.
My condition, as I have been terminated for it or threats of termination. The people in charge who should do something about the discrimination are usually against me. Or they treat me like I'm trying to freeload off the system. I have other disabilities and doctors, teachers, etc. only tell me it could be worse instead of being helpful. Ducking, like and subscribe.
Ducking, like and subscribe. That was a video from Reddit and Chill. Autistic people of Reddit. What would you like everyone to know? Very interesting video. Brought up some interesting points that we could have a little talk about. Definitely, go check out their channel if you are interested in this type of video. And consider liking the video, my video, and subscribing for daily autism content.